Good afternoon, everybody. Glad you're here. We welcome you. Thanks for being here and joining us for our afternoon worship time. Teasing Tim about getting a nap between services. He said he can get one. He said, I'm about to get one. I thought, well, okay. I told him I'd try not to disturb him, though, if he got asleep. Try to leave him that way. Did you ever remember falling asleep in school? Did you ever have anybody have trouble with that? Falling asleep in school? Say that again. Oh, yeah. Well, I remember falling asleep at school and I'd wake myself up, when you start drooling and have my head I didn't try to hide it. I'd put my head completely down on my desk. That wasn't good. But I lived through it, I reckon. Let's talk about folks that need our attention and our thoughts here on a serious level. Jude is going to have his surgery coming up this week. Pretty big deal. Hip surgery that they're trying to get some things prepared. So we're praying for Jude. Also, continue your prayers for Keith Fields. Has some things going on here now for some consecutive weeks. I think different things, but things going on consecutive weeks. I got a text from Sandra. Sandra May. I want y'all to hear it. She gave me the rundown on their deal. And it hurts my heart to think about it. It hurts more than my heart when I read it. Yours will be hurting in a different place too. Stomach virus has hit us hard. Ricky Monday, Nick Tuesday has had to get 2 IVs. Mary Megan on Wednesday, 1 IV. Paisley Tuesday. Ellis Friday of last week. I had it Sunday and Monday. Lee has had it last week. This virus is lasting 6 days. And she says she's going for some things this week that she's having to have some surgery. But my stomach wasn't hurting until I read that. But then after I read it, it's kind of like that phantom, that pain that comes when you feel sorry for somebody else too. So let's pray for the May family. Sorry that they've had so much trouble. Barbara Wallace, continue to pray for her. Miss Betty, Brother Pete, Freddie, Billy, Nelda Holden. Debbie Brederick's daughter, Megan. I'm glad that things are better for them. Continue to pray for Janice Osborne. Connie, I heard that Tony got to come home. I'm glad for that. So I know that was a scary thing. Continue our prayers for Cohen Danley as he is trying to get better. Lot was happening with him. Really serious situation there. So a lot of folks that need our thoughts. Anybody else we need to add to our list today as we have our prayer? All right. Well, Brother Cletus, if you don't care, lead us in a prayer and we'll get started today.
Blessings upon all those that are sick and suffering with a physical, spiritual, and mental Father, that you intervene in their lives in your own way. Teach us all, Father, to remember our days and we may have fine hearts to serve thee. We go about in our everyday world. We share the gospel with those around about us in our every thought, word, and deed. I pray, Father, for Brother Miles and all those that preach and teach the gospel in the spirit and the truth, to give them a long and useful life in thy service and preach for the living. That's our blessing upon our elders, Father. You bless them and their families, and you continue to grant them wisdom as they lead this congregation here at Athens. I pray, Heavenly Father, for the war factions around the world that there might be peace. I pray also for world leaders, Father, they turn their hearts and lives to thee and obey the gospel, Father, and move their country before thee. Thank you again for the many blessings we enjoy, and most of all for your Son. In his name I pray.
Amen. Thank you, Cletus. Appreciate that. Number 100. Number 100. When you get to 100, turn on over to 103. That's what I was looking for. 103. 103. I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise. I will say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. 113. 113. I know this song can be a little bit confusing, but if you sing bass, tenor, or alto, it may be just as easy to sing the words with the note that's assigned to the first word, okay? And if that gets confusing, then just jump on with me. I love this song. Sometimes it gets a little bit, well, what am I supposed to do? If nothing else, just sing the melody, okay? But if you want to sing the harmony parts, just sing the note that's associated with the words that has a line. And then when you get to the word where the note changes, and change that note for the word, okay? It's typically what I do. But suit yourself on all of that. Deeper than the ocean and wider than the sea is the grace of the Savior for sinners like me. Sent from the Father, and it thrills my soul just to feel and to know that his blood makes me whole. His grace reaches me. Yes, his grace reaches me and will last through eternity. Now I'm under his control, and I'm happy in my soul, just to know that his grace reaches me. Good job. We'll not risk it on the second verse of that. How about that? Well, we're back in 1 Peter. Appreciate the help that Sawyer provided last week. I'm going to be calling on some folks here in the days ahead, but appreciate his help, and David Hill as he has spoken, and Brother John and others as they've helped out. Appreciate their time, and I'm thankful for the work that they do and for helping out along the way. When we get to 1 Peter chapter 4, there's some things I'd like to say, kind of recapping, but I'm going to suffice to say that we've already talked about some of these things in the previous chapter. But let's move on. Let's move on to chapter 4. Therefore, kind of sends you to realize and recognize that the things he said before connect with what he's about to be talking about now. But as you hear this next chapter, he's going to launch again in a direction of steadfastness, a direction of faithfulness, a direction of courage, a direction of strength, a direction of fellowship and helping each other, and uses the reminder of, Jesus has been here before. He didn't give up, and neither should you. Now, that's going to take me 25 or 30 more minutes to kind of describe what I just said to you. But I think it's really interesting here that as you see the option, and we talk about this option all the time, as you see the option that is presented, and the option is being faithful to Christ and blessed because of it, or becoming unfaithful because of troubles that may come. When you see those kinds of things happen, and you've heard me say before, troubles usually don't leave you where they find you. Troubles usually don't leave you where they find you. They'll make you stronger. They'll drive you in the ground. They usually don't leave you. You aren't the same after something comes your way. You're going to either get better or you're going to get worse. And the worst part of these kinds of things, it's usually, why did this happen? Or how did this happen? Or why, in some cases, why did God let this happen? And I can't say that maybe everybody hadn't had some of those kinds of thoughts along the way without necessarily losing your faith, but especially in some of the more, I guess you'd say, some of the more horrendous circumstances of life. It's easy. It would be easy to say, okay, I'm not sure why this is happening, especially when it is something maybe that has affected you, but it may not have happened to you. But then when things start happening to you, then it gets a little bit more in line with, okay, now how can I stop this? And what do I need to do to keep this from happening again? And in this case, when they were about to be or were going to endure persecution, as Peter is warning them over and over again, they're about to be in the fire that is talked about, and they're going to be like the gold that's tried in the middle of a heated circumstance. And they're going to face troubles. They're going to face troubles that they could not have to face if they wanted to walk away from Christ. And that's the bottom line in the whole conversation. Well, Peter is making one more run at this in 1 Peter chapter 4 when he says, so then, since Christ suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude that he had and be ready yourselves to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Christ, you have finished with sin. One of the more powerful statements, as far as I'm concerned, that is made in the New Testament, really in the writings of Peter, and the strongest bottom line statement I think that he makes. And again, this is just mine; it doesn't have to be yours. But it's a launching pad for me to study back to the first and then to continue to study through the end of 1 Peter and then 2 Peter as well. But what he says here is, if you have successfully endured suffering, and we've talked about what some of that suffering has been through the years. We've talked about some of the ways that people were tormented and some of the ways that they were persecuted, some of the ways that they were tested in these moments, and I'd say a lot of them would be things that if you were able to live through it, then that'd be something. But if you saw it happening to somebody else and you decided to let it happen to you, that's something else for sure. Now, there were about 21 different kinds of torture. 21 different kinds of torture that they could inflict on somebody for any reason at any point and at any time. I mean, some where they would tie you in a burlap sack, and they would put animals that were in conflict with each other in this sack with you, and then throw all of you in the water. You think, I mean, that just is almost, I mean, you pick out 3 animals that can't get along. I mean, you pick out 3 animals that can't get along, and you think, now what's going to happen if you put them all in a burlap sack and you not even be in it? What's going to happen especially when that hits the water? And then you find yourself in that sack with those animals, and it's thrown in the water, and now they're fighting with each other, and they're fighting with you, and you're fighting trying not to die, and you're fighting the animals, and you're fighting trying not to drown, and I mean, it's hard for us to even imagine the kind of stress that would be involved in that kind of torture. And, it may be happening to John right now, and I'm standing next in line, and they say, well, look, you don't have to do this if you'll just renounce Christ. And John is probably tougher than me in this regard, but if I'm in that sack and I'm out there in the water and all that's going on, it's not going to be a pleasant sound. Yeah, I heard Keith whisper screaming. But that's just going to get me started. I'm going to be squalling. I'm going to be yelling. I'm going to be help and all the other things that go along with that. We're just talking about 3 animals in a sack and you. I don't know which one of these is lesser than the others, or which ones of these were worse than the others. I'd say being put in a molten and shaped calf or a bull, and you're in there by yourself, and then they heat it up, And they keep heating it up until you're burned to death inside of this hollowed out metal animal that's been shaped into a bull. I mean, you just think, well, what's going to be for the first person? Well, what about the person waiting in line that says, excuse me, when they get finished, you're going to be next. All you have to do is renounce Christ and you don't have to get in there. And in my judgment, it goes really downhill from there. Some of the others are things that we just can't. I mean, I can picture those two things, but I can't imagine them. And I hope that you can't either. So we're not talking about little stuff here. We're not talking about things that, it's not going to matter if it happens to you. No, oh, no, you're going to die. Or you're going to be wishing that you would. Well, some of the things that might not take your life, he talks about suffering physically for Christ in these verses. And what Peter's trying to remind them of and help them understand is that if you have suffered the things that you have suffered and you've remained faithful to Christ, that means you've made a choice. That means that you've made a choice, and your choice is faithfulness to Christ over anything else, and he ultimately finds himself in the statement of, if you're going to go through all of that, then you transition from someone who's craving this world to someone who's craving Christ, and in craving Christ, and you're finished with trying to live for sin. Now, this is a major, major transition. That's a major, major transition. Now, I've got some things I want to talk about today in regard to that. But as we approach that thought, I want to give you some things to think about as I talk about the things related to it. We have all known somebody. Hopefully, I'm not talking about you today as I talk to you. But we have all known somebody who was so in whatever they were doing, sometimes they succumb to it. But we have all known people who got so, you hear somebody say somebody getting their nose full. They got their nose full of whatever it was to the point where they say, I don't want that anymore. And it might be a temptation, but it's not going to be a temptation that they're going to easily succumb to again, because they're sick of that kind of life, and they're sick of living those kinds of circumstances, and they're sick of dealing with that kind of thing to the point where they don't want it anymore. They want something else. Well, that's what I want to talk about today. Let me read these verses again, and then let me give you the heading of the things that I want us to think through. As we think about this idea of being finished with sin. Since Christ suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had and be ready to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Christ, you have finished with sin. Now, the heading of my study and preparation for this lesson was this: what are some reasons why people stop chasing sin? What are some reasons why people stop chasing sin? And as I thought through these things, I tried to understand, why might somebody stop chasing sin, and just kind of think through the years of people that you or I might have experienced things with to know and to think about, how to answer that question. What are some reasons why people stop sinning? One of the first things I thought about that sin disrupts. And one of the things that I believe that people like you and I value, one of the first things that sin disrupts is peace. You agree with that? One of the first things that sin disrupts is peace. peace to the consciousness of an understanding sinner. Some folks who are in this kind of thing, they don't know. I mean, they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know, and that's sad in and of itself. But for a person who knows that they ought not be doing that, it's gonna disrupt the peace of their mind and their heart to the conscience of a sinner. It's gonna disrupt peace in their relationships and certain kinds of sin. It's going to disrupt peace in their day-to-day life because it's going to be constantly on their mind and constantly on their heart. Maybe they haven't necessarily grown tired of it, but they on the other hand, maybe it disrupts peace because they're constantly craving it. They just can't get enough, and they can't get it quickly enough. Peace because it disrupts their life, or it disrupts their direction, or maybe it disrupts their friendship, or maybe it disrupts their friend group. Because often people that do things that are like this, it's awful. It's awful, and it always winds up, or sometimes winds up, being a social circumstance. It would disrupt for sure their friend group if they're trying to be friends with Christians, because they know their friends are not going to abide that. And different sins cause different reactions. And different things that you might crave may be different than what your neighbor might be craving. But if there's a craving for it, and you have a different craving than those that you associate with, then sooner or later you're going to have to change groups, or you're going to have to leave that one. But here's what I know about that. In dealing with people through the years, there often comes a time when sin gets too big, or sometimes grows to be too much, and the person who is involved in it says, "I'm done with that," because they want their peace back. What is another reason why people stop chasing sin? If you're counting today, we're going to count past 4. So just get ready, okay? I'll try to go fast, but we're going to go past 4 today. Why do people stop chasing sin? Well, something else I thought about is when hope seems lost. When hope seems lost, there's nothing, when there's nothing to hope for except another round of whatever it is. When their hope is rooted in something that is destroying them. When their hope has nothing to offer them or to satisfy that part of their mind, often the sinner don't want it anymore. When they get to a point where all hope seems lost. The third thing I thought about of why people stop chasing sin, the third thing I thought about is when they are in constant fear. When they're in constant fear. Again, in the mind of a believer, in the mind of somebody who knows about all of this, that's kind of the setting we're talking about today. When they're living in constant fear, especially for a Christian who's walked away, often they have a fear of dying that they can't control. Sometimes the only fear that trumps that one is the fear of dying lost. The fear of spending an eternity, the fear of spending an eternity in hell. Or the fear of dying and not knowing what's going to happen. Sometimes they have a fear of living without their sin. I don't know if I'm going to be able to function without whatever this is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to function without, this substance or this relationship or whatever it is that's driving him. I don't know what I'm going to do without that, and how am I going to live that way? Maybe it's a fear of dying alone. When the sinner gets afraid enough, and the burden of sin and the fear it brings comes to a point in their life where they have to start checking themselves to, do I want to keep living this way? Often they decide they don't want it anymore. Now, just everybody take a break here. And let's try to be realistic in this situation. It may be easy for you or for me or somebody you or I might know to think, well, why don't they just quit that? I mean, why don't they just don't do that anymore? Not from a sin perspective, but I just want you to think for a moment of things that you are used to doing that are kind of a part of your deal. People that you know, or places that you go, or things that you do, food that you enjoy, the fun that you might have. I mean, I'm not going to repeat those 5, but you just think about those 5 criteria and things in your life, and then you make your own list of things that you could easily just say, well, I just won't do that anymore. And we're not talking about sin. We're just talking about things, that we just say we just don't want to do it anymore. Most people, if you're like most people, change doesn't come easy, and elimination of things doesn't come easy, and setting those things aside or those people aside or things that they enjoy or their food or whatever. I mean, that's not something that comes easily to us. So let's not, you and I, sit here and think, well, I just can't understand why they just can't not do that. In my judgment, it's not that simple. I know John preached a lesson here some years ago about, when you are going to eliminate something, you got to put something back in its place, right, John? And so it's easy for you or I to say, well, let's just take this out. Well, all right, well, what are you going to put back in there? Because something's going to go back in the place of whatever you're moving out. So let's don't sit here and think, and I'm not accusing you of this, but I do want to warn you that you or I don't need to just sit here and think, well, I just can't believe that they just can't give that up. Sometimes giving it up is not that easy, and they don't know what they're going to do otherwise. And that's one of the things and one of the reasons why it's so important and so valuable for you and I to be able to depend on each other and know that we each have each other's back in these situations, because you might wind up being the replacement for something someone has that they're trying to get rid of. They may need your friendship, or they may need your fellowship, or they may need your encouragement. They may need your phone call or your text or something to take the place of that over there, so that they can say to that over there, no, I'm not doing that because I've got this to do now. No, I can't because I'm going with this person now. Why do people stop chasing sin? Something else I thought about is that the fun wears off. The fun wears off. Sometimes some of these things that maybe feel fun or seem fun or are fun wind up not being so fun after all? When it's no longer fun waking up in a hangover situation, or it's no longer fun waking up laying in your, oh boy, this is, I know I went right for the jugular on this one, but when you wake up in your own excretions, it's not fun anymore not knowing where you will go to get your next meal. We talked about that the other day, and I mentioned that 2 or 3 times. Dwight talked about hitting rock bottom, and John says rock bottom is when you don't have something to eat or know how you're going to get it. Not knowing where you'll go to get your next meal or where you can sleep safely. It's not fun running with people who are running after the same thing or things you are and are feeling as miserable as you. There can come a time when the fun wears off that a person might decide they don't want that sin anymore. Why do people stop chasing sin? Something else I thought about is when it starts to affect their physical well-being. I have a relative long since left this world. Thankfully, got some things straight before they left this world, but I had a relative years ago that drank themselves to near blindness. He had his regrets. But, I mean, there are lots of things we can put on that list, and I'm not highlighting one, I'm just using it as a personal illustration. Whatever it's caused, some disease, some defect, the loss of their faculties. There can come a time when a sinner says enough is enough and they don't want it anymore. Why do people stop chasing sin? Something else I thought about is when it affects their mental health or their mental fitness. When sin affects their ability to clearly think, to be able to reason and choose, when their mind can only think of evil, and they grow weary and tired of trying to sort through the mess to see anything that matters. There can come a time when the sinner decides, I don't want this anymore. When they lose their family, or they lose everything they have or ever wanted, when it is all gone, sometimes a sinner will decide they don't want that sin anymore. When something bad happens, maybe it's a wreck or a robbery or the death of someone, sometimes someone they love, maybe they will decide they don't want it anymore. When they realize that what they're doing is a sin and that sin will condemn them eternally, when they understand that there is help and hope and forgiveness, now we're making progress. Now we're making progress, John. Wow. And I didn't look at him. It's got to go right in. Wow, isn't that something? When they realized that a life lived for God and like Jesus brings, when they realize that a life lived for God and like Jesus brings peace to their mind and salvation to their soul, that their friend group is now living the same positive life that they are living, when they understand that tomorrow is not something to dread, but something to look forward to. That's when you know you've gotten somewhere. You know, y'all, it's not necessarily the regret of all these things. And if all they're doing, and I think John would agree here, if all they're doing is regretting that they've lost that, or they're regretting that they've lost that, or regretting that they've lost that, and down the line that we're talking about, they're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to get anywhere if we're just regretting that we don't have that ability to that sin anymore. That's right. Because that's all they're living for is themselves. And when that can't happen, they don't have it. That's right on the money. But when they understand that in Christ there is life, and there is hope, and there is help, and there is salvation, and there is peace, and there is an eternal home, and there are the blessings that come as a result of following Christ, even though you have to go through trouble to do it, it's worth it. It's worth it. In fact, I'm just going to read you what I've written here. How you really can know all about all of this is when trouble comes to those who are doing right and they continue to do right. When trouble comes to those that do right, when it would be easier to quit and they keep going. And in that situation and in those moments, God and really everybody else can clearly see there's someone who's committed. There's someone who's committed to Christ. There's someone who's committed to living the life that comes as a result of their knowledge of Christ. Look, y'all, it's not about checking boxes. It's not to get certain places at certain times and do certain things in certain ways. Although those things are important, if that's all you got, that's all you got. It's a relationship that comes because Jesus died for you. He shed his blood for you, and you realize and recognize the sheer importance of that and the destiny that you have without it. That's when all this starts to bloom. Let me keep reading here. Sometimes the faithful stumble and they need help. You ever need help? Ever need help? Raise your hand if you ever need help. Ever need help? My back door neighbor sometimes needs help. He's gotten his physical shape has gotten to the point where he can't do it. His wife will call, "Are you home?" She said, "If I see your blue truck, I know there's hope next door." I said, "Well, I've got a car too, so don't count on that truck. But if you'll call, I'll get there as fast as I can." And there's been days I've had to help get him up out of the floor. Needing help. Needing help. Abel has gotten to a point now where he says, "Help me, Papa." And part of me wants to say, "Son, you can do this." But he might get to a point someday when he doesn't say, "Help me, Papa," and I'm wanting to. If I'm on err, it's going to be on the side of helping him too much. It's not to say I can't mess that up. Came yesterday and he's wanting to play outside. He's wanting to climb, this playground down here, and I'm so thankful for that thing. And we're going to play out there for a little while. And he's going to climb. Well, he gets to the top of the slide. You don't need any help to come down a slide. I didn't think. You just get on it and you land at the bottom. Well, no, help me, Papa. And you know what helped him yesterday? I'm just standing there. I said, all right, I got you, boy. You just come on down that slide. Well, he finally got so that he was sliding down backwards and every other way on his stomach going backwards. When he knew I was down there, he was going to try it all, I reckon. Sometimes the faithful stumble and they need help. Sometimes we may need a reminder, but they know and will have some desire to acknowledge their fault and return. And I put in bold and in capital letters, they may need help, support, and care, and for sure they need to be loved. So then, since Christ suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had. Be ready to suffer too, for if you have suffered physically for Christ, you have finished with sin. You won't spend the rest of your lives chasing your own desires, but you will be anxious to do the will of God, Peter says in verse 2. You have had enough in the past of the evil things that godless people enjoy, their immorality and lust, their feasting and drunkenness and wild parties, and their terrible worship of idols. There comes a point when you say, I don't want that. Right? And Peter said, you're going to have to be that way in order to endure some of these things that are coming. Because if you don't, if you haven't, you're going to join the crowd that says, no, I don't believe in him. The faithful will be found. The unfaithful will give up under persecution and pressure. Somebody said, well, what if they kill me? All right, just go to heaven. What if, yeah, but it only lasts a little while. Eternity is forever. Something to think about, isn't it? Thank you for thinking with me today, even on one last hour's sleep. Oh, me, I tell you, I wish they'd get this time and leave it there. But if there is a spiritual need, if we can assist you and help you, then please give us a chance. We can't solve every problem, but we're going to love you and we're going to help you. And we realize that it may not be a one-shot deal. It may be you need help over the course of time. That's what the church is, right? I mean, that's the blessings of it, to know that we've got each other. And that we've got each other. All right. Thanks for listening. Folks at home, 256-740-2482. All right. Let's see here. Some things we need to think about. So I need to remind you about. I didn't mention it this morning, and I should have. And I'll have a slide for next Sunday. But be sure, let's do all that we can to encourage Anna Kate and her man. That's coming up here on the 22nd. And you need to RSVP, let Nicole know. I've got the midweek reminder here. All the numbers are right here, and we'll have that available to you. In fact, I'll just leave it right here. But please let's encourage them and help them in every way. She is such a sweetheart, and her mother and grandmother are pretty sweet too. So we're proud for them. But nonetheless, let's be sure that we do that. I hate I missed that this morning, but we'll mention it again Wednesday and then next Sunday. Let's see. Is there a deadline, Glenda? Is there a deadline on when we need to RSVP by? Have you heard that? Okay. All right. That's okay. All right. Well, just you can tell Glenda. But anyway, we're on your side and we love you. Ladies' Day. Next Saturday. Let's be sure that we get on board, girls and ladies, for that. That'll be next Saturday morning, kind of starting at 8:30, really getting started at 9. Lunch will be served. Bring your favorite friend and bring your favorite salad. But before you do all that, sign that list back there. That'll be a big help to them as they're making their plans toward that. You could see Janice or Beth or Stephanie in regard to that next Saturday. Latch Leaders got some things pending, some things happening. I'm supposed to set it this morning and I didn't. And I thought about that going out the door. I'm supposed to tell you about t-shirts and all that, but you need to get your papers back in so that they can get all that done here in the next few days, because they got to make the order so they can get it all back. So note that, and it'll be a part of that. Anything else today before we close? All right, Charlie, why don't you lead us in a prayer? We'll be dismissed.
Right. Dear Lord, thank you for another Sunday that we can come here today and to learn more about your word and to sing and pray. Hopefully everything we've done here today has been pleasing to you. Please be with all the ones that have been mentioned, that are sick, that have lost loved ones, whatever may be going on with them. You would for them and comfort them, whatever your will is. Please be with us